the Headwaters Resource Conservation and Development Council presents the Great Lakes Restoration Initiative. In partnership with the United States Department of Agriculture, Natural Resources Conservation Service, the United States Environmental Protection Agency, the Foundation for Pennsylvania Watersheds, the Pennsylvania Grazing Lands Coalition, Penn State College of Agricultural Sciences, Penn State Extension, the Potter County Conservation District, and by the Pennsylvania Department of Conservation and Natural Resources, Bureau of Forestry. Thank you for your support.
Hi, my name is Danielle Ray, and I'm a water resources educator with Penn State Extension. Today I'm going to be talking about some of the agricultural best management practices that have been installed as part of the Great Lakes Restoration Initiative program, with the goal of improving water quality in the Genesee River watershed. As part of this project, the Thompson Farm has installed stream bank fencing, converted a continuous grazing system to rotational grazing, and installed a roofed and stabilized heavy use area and manure storage. One of the main goals of installing these best management practices as part of this project is to reduce sediment and phosphorus pollution from the farm. Today I would like to talk to you a little more about sediment and phosphorus pollution, how this is being monitored on the farm, and why we expect to see improvements based on the practices that have been installed. According to the Pennsylvania Department of Environmental Protection's Integrated Water Quality Report, over 5,700 miles of stream in Pennsylvania are impaired due to agricultural activities, and siltation and nutrients are within the top 5 causes of these impairments. Sediment is considered Pennsylvania's largest surface water pollutant by volume. It is made up of soil particles that have been detached from the land by erosion and deposited into our streams, rivers, ponds, and lakes. The source of sediment can be from farm fields, construction sites, poorly maintained dirt and gravel roads, or degrading stream banks. Any soil that is not protected from rainfall or runoff may be vulnerable to being eroded and becoming sediment pollution. Sediment can also originate within a stream channel itself. When excess water flows within streams during rainstorms or because of more stormwater runoff from roads, compacted soils, or other impervious surfaces, the water becomes deeper and more powerful, eroding away at banks and creating even more sediment pollution. Sediment pollution can degrade water quality in many ways. Suspended sediments increase the turbidity, or cloudiness of the water, which results in increased water temperature, reduced oxygen levels, more costly water treatment, and poor aquatic habitat. Sediment can also blanket the stream bed in a process called sedimentation, which also reduces habitat. Sediment poses additional water quality risks because it often carries other pollutants such as nutrients, bacteria, heavy metals, and more along with it. These pollutants originate from agriculture and other sources and can have short-term and long-term effects. According to the Pennsylvania Department of Environmental Protection, erosion and sedimentation is the primary pathway for delivering nutrients, especially phosphorus, into our waterways. It has been estimated that 80% of the phosphorus in our streams is associated with eroded sediment. Although phosphorus is considered to be an essential nutrient for plants, it tends to be limited in most aquatic ecosystems, which means that adding more phosphorus can result in things like algae blooms, reduced dissolved oxygen, and even fish kills. Natural sources of phosphorus include soil and rock in our environment. However, increased phosphorus in our waterways often comes from runoff from cropland, manure storages, fertilized lawns, as well as septic systems and wastewater treatment plants. The practices that have been installed on the Thompson Farm are expected to reduce sediment and phosphorus pollution. And to assess these impacts, a variety of water quality monitoring has been and will be done. Quarterly water samples have been and will be collected and analyzed for total suspended solids, total phosphorus, and orthophosphate. Total suspended solids is a measure of the sediment particles floating in the water and can be used to determine how much fine sediment is in the river. Total solids, on the other hand, is a measure of the suspended solids, settlable solids, and dissolved solids, and can be an indicator of both sediment and nutrient pollution. Total phosphorus is a measure of all of the phosphorus in the water, where orthophosphate, which is also known as plant-available phosphorus, is the form of phosphorus typically associated with fertilizers. Measuring orthophosphate is a way to estimate the amount of phosphorus available for algae and plant growth. These parameters were chosen because the goal of the project was to reduce sediment and phosphorus pollution, and these parameters indicate how much sediment and phosphorus is in the water. By taking samples where the stream enters and leaves the property, we can learn how much sediment and phosphorus in the stream and how water quality changes as the river flows through the farm. In general, the value for total suspended solids, total phosphorus, and orthophosphate have been fairly low, indicating that base flow water quality is fairly good.
At the first sampling, we noticed slight increases in sediment and phosphorus from upstream to downstream locations, indicating that sediment and phosphorus increased as the Genesee River flowed through the farm. At the last two sampling events, our measurements for sediment decreased slightly as we moved from upstream to downstream. Total phosphorus was not detected in August, but increased slightly from upstream to downstream in November. Orthophosphate was not detected in any of the samples.
As I mentioned, this data indicates that during base flow conditions, water quality is fairly good, and may even be improving since best management practices have been installed. However, additional sampling is needed to indicate if these are just seasonal differences. Also, it is difficult to determine how the agricultural practices may be affecting the watershed during or following rains, since sampling was done during dry weather, and stormwater runoff has a huge potential for moving sediment and nutrients into our streams. To determine the potential amount of runoff and the quality of runoff coming from the Thompson farm, a Cornell sprinkle infiltrometer will be used to test the infiltration rates of the soils in the pastures and the riparian buffer. By determining the infiltration rates, we can learn how much the water the soils can absorb before generating runoff. This method also allows for collecting runoff water so that it can be assessed for the same parameters we were assessing the stream for, which will provide information for the amount of potential pollution that is running off of the farm. In general, the practices that have been installed on the Thompson farm are well known to reduce sediment and phosphorus pollution. However, more sampling will need to be done in order to draw more specific conclusions from the property. Although we're still monitoring water quality, I'd now like to focus on how we expect stream bank fencing, rotational grazing, and a roofed and stabilized heavy use area and manure storage to reduce the sediment and phosphorus that's getting into the water. Stream bank fencing is fencing that's installed to keep livestock out of streams. When livestock have direct access to waterways, they tend to damage the stream banks and muddy the water, which results in sediment and nutrient pollution. By placing the fencing at least 35 feet from the water's edge, it allows natural vegetation to grow up, or provides a space for trees to be planted, creating a riparian buffer. A riparian buffer involves planting or retaining trees, shrubs, or tall grasses along the banks of rivers and streams. At the Thompson farm, we have what is called an herbaceous riparian buffer growing because the vegetation is mostly grass. By creating this buffer and excluding livestock from the riparian area, we are helping water quality in many ways. First, we are preventing livestock from accessing the stream and damaging the stream bank, which allows plants to grow and roots to hold the soil in place. Also, by allowing the vegetation to grow taller, it slows the flow of stormwater. Also, the roots will grow deeper and the soil will become more porous and act like a sponge, soaking in rain and runoff, which also captures sediment and nutrients that may be carried along with it. Rotational grazing is another farming practice being implemented on the Thompson farm that can help improve water quality by improving soil health. Rotational grazing is the practice that involves moving livestock from paddock to paddock to allow vegetation time to rest and regrow. Because livestock are concentrated in a smaller area and moved more frequently compared to continuous grazing, selective grazing is reduced, which allows for improved vegetative growth, and this has been found to increase soil organic carbon and reduce compaction. The more even movement of cattle from paddock to paddock also promotes more even manure distribution and improves nutrient cycling. Overall, by decreasing compaction and improving soil organic carbon, both infiltration and water holding capacity are improved. The more water that can soak into the ground, the less that will run off, which results in reduced erosion as well as sediment and nutrient pollution. The final best management practice being implemented on the Thompson farm is a roofed and stabilized heavy use area and manure storage. Heavy use areas are also sometimes called animal concentration areas or sacrifice lots, and they are any type of feedlot or loafing area where, due to the concentration of animals, it is not possible to establish and maintain dense vegetation. In unprotected animal concentration areas, the soil and manure are vulnerable to being washed away and becoming pollution. By stabilizing the heavy use area and manure storage with concrete and covering this area with a roof, both sediment and manure runoff are prevented. These are just a few examples of some agricultural best management practices that can be used to reduce sediment and nutrient pollution. Thank you for joining me to learn more about how the Thompson Farm and the Great Lakes Restoration Initiative project in the Genesee River Watershed are working to improve water quality in Pennsylvania and beyond.